Hello, and welcome to Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. Before we begin our story today, please hit the like button if you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. You can also join my Patreon where we have a really big goal. I'll talk about that at the end of the video. Predators come in many forms, but there are some things almost all of them have in common. An ability to sense weakness or pain or fragility or desperation in another human being, and an instinct as to how to use that weakness and pain to get something for themselves. As we discuss today's story, I want you to keep something in mind, something I've learned many times over and over in my life. The greatest con artists in history always mix fact with fiction. There is a little bit of truth or a lot of truth in almost everything they say. Let me say that again. A great con artist always makes sure there is some truth in every lie they tell. Think about that during the episode, because today we are talking about one of the greatest con artists in recent history. I feel like I've put this episode off as long as I can. I've had many requests to cover this situation, and I've avoided it because I have very strong opinions about this woman. And those opinions are rooted in not only watching documentaries and interviews with people she has known her whole life, but I have to be a little bit careful here. I have spoken with people who have been involved in this cult, who have been at one time brainwashed by Teal Swan. And I know people who have recovered from their time with Teal Swan. This is not your usual true crime story. No crime has actually been committed here that we know of yet, but I do cover cults, and this is some culty shit. Who is Teal Swan? Some of you instantly recognize that name, and many of you will not. By the end of today, you might wish you'd never heard of her, because this is a doozy. I've thought long and hard about how I want to go at this subject, because there are so many different angles from which to approach this topic. I'm going to tackle it like I do with most of my difficult subjects. Straight facts, a lot of research, and some shitty sarcasm just to keep us sane. Buckle up, my friends, because you are about to enter the goofy, kooky, new age bullshit world of a modern con woman who calls herself a guru. Sage your house, snuggle your pets, get you a gallon of ice cream, say a prayer to the flying spaghetti monster if you want, I don't care. But put those crash helmets on, because we are going for a walk through the cult of Teal Swan. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's get into it. June 16th, 1984. Mary Teal Bosworth is born in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Her family moved to Logan, Utah when she was very young, and she was raised in Utah. The Bosworth family was not Mormon. They went to various churches and never really subscribed to any one church. They kind of floated around from church to church. The Bosworths were also very into New Age beliefs. Now, I'm about to make some people mad. What's new? In Utah back in the 1980s, especially if you were not Mormon, you had a hard time being accepted in all circles. Now, my sisters who are still Mormon, for anyone new here, I talk extensively about how I was born and raised Mormon, and I'm not anymore in this episode, so go and watch that if you want to know more. My sisters who are still Mormons say it's not as bad as it used to be. And that's great. I am helping to raise non-Mormon grandchildren here in Utah, and I will tell you that they have already experienced some things, not being Mormon here, so it's definitely still an issue. Well, apparently Mary Bosworth always felt ostracized, not being Mormon in Utah, but that's not really what made her life difficult. I will preface this next part by acknowledging that I am not a mental health professional. I have no medical training and would never assume to be able to diagnose anyone. I do study mental disorders and psychological behaviors about 60 hours a week and have done that for many years. There are some behaviors that even a layperson like myself can spot in certain people. Knowing what I know now, if I were growing up around Mary Bosworth or around her as an adult, I would probably believe that she has borderline personality disorder at least, and she also has a histrionic personality disorder. Histrionic personality disorder is characterized by people who are unhappy and upset when they are not the center of attention. They are seductive, overly sexual and provocative, and they have quickly shifting and shallow emotions that they play up to appear deeper than they are because they want to have the appearance that they care. They also use their appearance to draw attention to themselves. Borderline personality disorder is characterized by unstable relationships, extreme emotional swings, chronic feelings of emptiness, a shifting self-image, a fear of abandonment, and extreme anger. If you listen to anyone who actually spent time with Mary Bosworth as a child, they will tell you she exhibited many signs, perhaps not all, but many signs of both of these personality disorders. Again, these are simply my observations as a layperson who has studied this a lot. Now stay with me here as I lay the groundwork because it's very important in our overall story, which is not technically a true crime story. I have serious concerns and deep feelings that may change in the future. If this woman continues, we're going to get into that. But again, I do cult stories, and this is a cult story. Mary Teal Bosworth claims her parents only called her Teal. They only called her by her middle name, Teal as in the color. And then she married a man, one of her marriages, who had the last name of Swan, and she kept that name, Teal Swan. So from here out in the episode, even as a child, I'm going to refer to her as Teal Swan. Now, she openly says on camera that she's been married 5 times. She's only 39, so I'm assuming she just picked the name of the husband she liked the best and kept that. Now I need to introduce you to a few individuals that you probably don't know. This is John DeLynn. John is famous in the Mormon and ex-Mormon communities for getting excommunicated from the Mormon Church simply for asking questions he was told to stop asking, but he didn't stop. Now, that's definitely simplifying John's story, but that's it in a nutshell. He is now a very popular podcast host. His podcast is called Mormon Stories. John has degrees in psychology and in behavioral science. He has the training and the education that I do not have, so I'm relying on him heavily today as far as the science behind this woman goes. This is important because Teal Swan's teachings have a lot to do with the now debunked psychological phenomenon known as recovered memories. Back in the 1980s and into the 1990s, even after that, there were psychologists that believed and taught that sometimes as a way of self-protection, we lock our bad memories and trauma up in a little box in our brain and we store them away. And then when we go into therapy and the therapist helps us find the right key to unlock that box, we can open it and let the bad memories and the trauma out and deal with it. Now, this has been completely debunked in the last decades. Our memories do not work that way. Neuroscientists have proven with hard science that our memories are not wired that way, and now no self-respecting psychology professional still believes in recovered memories. And this is very important for our story today. Now, if you're my age, you'll remember the biggest recovered memories story of all time, and it happened during the Satanic Panic era of the 1980s and early 1990s when Teal Swan was a girl. If you're unfamiliar with this story, it's known as the McMartin preschool trial case, and it basically involves parents and teachers that planted stories in little kids' heads telling them they'd been satanically abused while at preschool. I'll cover that story if you want me to, but it all had to do with this recovered memories thing, and it was all bullshit. Even though Teal Swan was a very young child when all this was happening, her parents were into this new age psychology stuff, and they talked about it a lot around her, and it stuck with her even as a young child. Teal Swan would later go on to make some of the most outlandish claims about satanic ritual abuse you've ever heard. Now, this isn't entirely her fault. Teal was a very difficult and dark and troubled child. Her parents saw this in her, and they were really into this stuff and they wanted to help her. I'm not saying they didn't want to help her, but they were kind of feeding the problem. They took her to a therapist in Utah named Barbara Snow. Barbara Snow. Barbara Snow was one of the main forces in the Satanic Panic recovered memories era. She has a doctorate of social work. She's on the National Board for the Prevention of Child Abuse. She's got a master's of social work. She's magna cum laude this and Phi Beta Kappa this, and I wouldn't go near her with a 10-foot pole. I'm sorry, I wouldn't. Barbara Snow was put on professional probation in 2008 after the Utah Division of Occupational Licensing stated she violated professional and ethical principles. The board alleged Barbara Snow fabricated her notes and also destroyed someone's computer with a baseball bat. That's all going to be a no for me when I'm picking a therapist. But it does appear that she heavily influenced Teal Swan to believe she was satanically abused as a child. What you're going to learn about Teal today is that she is a prolific liar and that she might be delusional. It's difficult to tell how much of her own bullshit she actually believes, but she definitely knows she is lying a lot of the time. And this is where I need to introduce you to another person. This woman is Diana Ribera. Diana grew up not only friends with Teal Swan in Logan, Utah, but best friends with Teal Swan. The girls spent so much time together that their parents began to wonder if their relationship was healthy. Diana knows Teal Swan. She has photos of them together. Their families, both families, have verified that Diana and Teal were inseparable for many years growing up. She has receipts. There's no question that Diana Ribera knows Teal Swan almost better than anyone. Teal Swan? She claims she doesn't even know who Diana Ribera is. And this is why I say that Teal Swan is a liar. There are certain things that have been proven, blatant lies, and this is one of them. I'm going to tell you just a little snippet of what Diana says Teal was like as a girl. Teal is a couple of years older than Diana, and they were friends starting about when Diana was 9 and Teal was 11. The girls both attended Edith Bowen. It's an elementary school on a college campus that focuses on biology and nature, and it's considered a very good school. But it was during that time that Teal Swan began telling Diana Ribera some very strange things. Once Teal told Diana that there was a ghost dog that lived in her ceiling. Teal would feed Diana alcohol. She would pour shots of Irish cream for Diana, who was 9 at the time, and Teal is downing the shots of alcohol while Diana is barely choking it down. When Teal was just 12 years old, she began showing Diana hardcore pornography, bondage, harm, things like that. Now remember, Diana is younger, so she wanted to seem cool to her older friend. Once Teal pulled up a website on Diana's home computer, and it was a reality website. Remember what I said about hypersexuality being part of histrionic personality disorder? Teal would tell Diana she was the Wiccan goddess of sex and that she had mind control over men. She would show them her body and she could make them do what she wanted. This girl is 12 at the time. She's obviously been exposed to some things, and I think a lot of those things were on her parents' own bookshelves. Teal would tell Diana that men were stupid and that she laughed about the fact she could control men by acting sexual around them. The problem is, Diana says she realizes as an adult that Teal really had no exposure to adult men. So where is she coming up with all this stuff? Now, no one is saying that it's impossible that Teal Swan was abused as a child. What we're saying is the stories that she's coming up with do not line up with anyone else's stories that were in her circle. Diana never saw any type of abuse with Teal, and she feels that the incredible stories Teal made up were nothing compared to what Teal said happened to her in childhood later on. And she would have told Diana about those things if they were really happening to her. Teal always said that she was a victim of abuse. It wasn't like she was too scared to talk about being abused, but she never really had any details. Teal Swan's parents are both mild-mannered school teachers, but they were very into psychology and New Age theology. Do you use the word theology? I don't know. New Age philosophy. Teal was taken to just about every mental health counselor they could find. They knew something was wrong with Teal. Diana specifically remembers the look of joy on Teal's face when she would shock Diana with shocking pornography or stories. She would get naked and run around outside. Teal enjoyed shocking people. This is kind of a scary kid. Teal's mother was a school counselor on top of being a teacher, and so she had all these textbooks. And Teal would read these textbooks and learn to self-diagnose herself. She also learned how to behave in order to make people think you had a mental disorder. And Diana remembers Teal really enjoying talking about how she was mentally ill. Teal was very into Wicca. Full disclaimer, the practice of Wicca is very much like the practice of Christianity. A lot of people who claim to be both are nothing like what they should be if they were actually following the practice. But Teal claims she's a powerful witch and she has magic powers. She also has a very powerful temper. Her parents were terrified of her. The kids at school were terrified of her. And whenever Teal Swan did not get her way, there was a tantrum straight from hell. Remember what I said about extreme anger and terrific mood swings? So why does all of this matter? Why are we talking about this? Because Teal Swan has built a following of millions based on her claims that she is a survivor of horrific trauma. Among her claims, she has witnessed the murder of 7 infants that were thrown into bonfires or put on grills, terrible things. She claims that for 13 years, she was taken each weekend by her parents to a man claiming to be a therapist that was actually a Satanist, child-molesting, baby-killing, crazed individual. She's claiming that he bound her and gagged her, assaulted her in every which way, shape, and form known to man. Teal has built her entire personality, her entire business, her entire following on these stories. And people listen to her because they admire how she has overcome such unthinkable, crippling trauma. That's where all of her credibility comes from. That's why this matters. Without these stories of this childhood trauma, Teal Swan has no following. She has no credibility. But everyone who knows Teal and grew up around her says everything she says is bullshit. Now, we all have childhood trauma. We all have times when we're, abused by, even if it's not a family member, maybe a teacher, somebody at school, a friend. But that's not what Teal is talking about. She is talking about the wildest stuff you can come up with. Okay, so great. People are following her. That's their choice. Why should we care? Because the people who are following Teal are damaged, broken, hurting, and wounded people that are flocking to this woman for help. Because according to her, she has been through it and she has risen above it and she can help them. According to the people that know Teal Swan in her real life, she's a pathological liar. Teal claims in her own words on her own website that she was a dancer and a ballerina. Now, this is where I am an expert, and I can tell you without a doubt, that's a lie. There are not one, but 2 documentaries about Teal Swan. One of them is on Hulu, and it's called The Deep End. In that documentary that sadly I had to pay for, it's not on your regular Hulu subscription, there are clips of Teal Swan on point shoes, some people call them toe shoes, they're called point shoes, trying to do some ballet steps. She's like 12 or 13 years old in this clip. She has no skills. She should not be on point shoes. She is not a ballerina, and she did not go on to become a professional ballerina because if you're not at a certain level by the time you're 12 or 13 years old, you are not a professional dancer. You don't become a professional dancer in your 20s. So that's how I know she's a liar. Also, I scoured the internet looking for any trace of her in a professional dance company of any kind, let alone a ballet company. Nothing. Not a word anywhere. In the same paragraph on her website where she professes to be a professional dancer or have been a professional dancer, she claims to have been a competitive horseback rider, a professional skier, and a long track speed skater. I mean, I've done a lot of shit, but it's like opening businesses that either fail or I sell. I've tried a lot of different things. I was never great at any of them. I was never a professional. I'm a professional singer, but outside of that, and I taught dance. I was never a professional dancer, but I taught dance. But she's claiming like she was on the Telemark Ski Association. It's a professional team. She was a professional dancer, a professional skier, a professional speed skater, a horseback rider, a professional horseback rider. So I went online and I found a statement from the Telemark Ski Association. This is what they have to say about her. Teal Swan was on the DEV team and did not do very well. She was only on it for 1 year and she did not produce. She was never 4th in championships, ever. She needed a lot of work. Also, she never trained with us from 7 a.m. to 4:30 every day. I was the president at the time. She never placed 4th in anything. She never placed at all. Now, that is coming from the president of this professional ski association. But again, remember what I said at the beginning. See what Teal does? She's a great con artist. She mixes fact with fiction. There's a little truth in almost everything she says. She was on the team. The rest is a lie. Teal also claims that she was a professional model sought out by the world's leading magazines and editorial photographers. So where are the photos? Well, idiots of the world, they were buried away when Teal transformed and told the photographers, who of course had been horribly abusing her, that she was going to tell on them. So the photographers that took all of these photos of her hid the photos and buried them away because they had also been abusing Teal Swan. I cannot. I'm not even going to pretend to be nice in this because I'm not. Let's get into the craziest things Teal Swan has said. She claims that her childhood mentor sewed her into a human corpse for 12 hours. First of all, how do you hollow out a human corpse? It's not an elk. You know, if you've ever killed an elk, you know, you can almost like get inside as you're gutting it. That's not a human being. I'm putting way too much thought into this. After this man let her free, Teal said, he ate the corpse's leg in front of her. I can't. She claims this same man used her sexuality to lure immigrants over the border that he would then use for human sacrifice. Look, we all know that terrible things go on in this world. Terrible things happen every day. Every terrible thing in the world did not happen to this one lady. It did not. So when did this whole cult thing begin? I couldn't find an exact date, but Teal Swan begins posting videos on YouTube sometime around 2012. At least that's the earliest video I could find on her YouTube channel. She starts to grow a following on YouTube, and after 11 years, she has amassed 1.6 million followers. Now that's why I'm so bothered. There are a lot of people that are watching these videos believing this woman is qualified to give out life advice. Very serious life advice. That scares me and it angers me. After YouTube, Teal Swan started writing books. She's got at least 7 books that I found online. She could have more, but then what does she start to do? Seminars. You can't be a self-help guru without seminars. You got to get those butts in the seats. You got to stand up on that stage with your little mic thing, and you've got to tell people that are really desperate for help that you can help them. If you're really desperate to get FaceTime with Teal, you can pay thousands and thousands of dollars to go to one of her retreats up in Park City, up north in Utah here. Whenever she has them, she might have them in other places besides Park City. I don't know. Now, I suffered through a few videos on YouTube and a few seminar clips so I could get a feel for what's really going on. And I will tell you, Teal Swan is a fantastic con artist. She really is. She says some things that are totally true, and she also has some really good insights at times. The way she discusses loneliness and connection and trauma. Not only do I believe she has felt those things, but I believe she's been to a lot of therapy, and she's learned all the right terminology and phrases to share with those who follow her. But my guys, she is not a therapist. She is not an educated person. She is not a counselor. In the same way that I take issue with Mormon bishops and Catholic priests giving psychological counseling and life advice to people when they have no training to do so, I take issue with this woman. And now I'm going to go off on a tangent. When did we lose our grasp on the fact that experts know more about their field of expertise than we do? I'm going to try not to spin out here because this is a real hot button issue with me. I have lost at least 100 acquaintances or friends over the fact that in the last few years, they think they know more than doctors, more than scientists, more than NASA engineers, more than people who've studied the Middle East for, 16 years of college. Experts are experts because they have more training, more knowledge, and more experience in something than we do. Expertise is still a thing. Expertise matters. You and Google don't know as much as someone who has years and years of training and experience in a field. Point blank, period. The end. Okay, I'm done. This is an issue that just really pisses me off. The only people expertise does not matter to are conspiracy theorists and extremists and whack jobs. This woman is counseling people who are very fragile mentally, and this is why it matters, and this is why we have to talk about it. Teal calls her followers the Teal Tribe. She was calling them that before she had any followers. And she calls people like me Teal Truthers, because her ego is so large that she even has to include her own name in the labels that she gives to other people. This woman is narcissistic, does not begin to cover it. There needs to be like a new category for people like her. This is what Teal Swan tells people that come seeking help from her. Most medical problems are symptoms of spiritual distress, even acne. So if you're sick, it's your fault. She claims to be a medical savant who knows and understands disease better than doctors. She claims to have medical intuition, and she can cure and heal people when modern medicine cannot. This woman tells people that she can literally X-ray their bodies with her mind. She can see their bones, she can see their genes, and she can zoom in on their DNA. What the hell are all the scientists doing? We've got this woman over here, just bring her in. Fix it all, cure cancer. Oh my God, I'm gonna have a stroke. I gotta calm down. She claims her X-ray vision allows her to see how someone digests food. She claims she can watch the food track through your digestive system. And she says she is part extraterrestrial and part human. I so wish I was joking. She says she is a spiritual catalyst who allows her followers to use her as a conduit as long as they pay her money. Oh, and on top of all of this, she paints paintings, shitty, horrible paintings that put off healing frequencies. And she means that like scientifically, like her paintings in the room will heal you. Here are some of her paintings. They're making me feel something, but it ain't healed. Aren't these just like the mandala coloring book pages that you do on your iPad? I mean, she also makes and sells her treasures. Here is one of her items. Look, they're not for me. Some people may really enjoy them. I don't. Teal Swan has told people that she is God, she is Jesus, and this is the part where we need to talk more about the documentary. Like I said earlier, it's called The Deep End. I was forced to purchase it to do research for this episode. It starts out benignly enough, a bunch of New Age people gathering at seminars and retreats and floating in pools and screaming at the top of their lungs and crying. And look, all of that actually does happen in trauma work. It does, and it can be helpful. I have absolutely zero doubt that the people going to seek something from Teal Swan have trauma. No one doubts that. But that is why she is so dangerous. She is not qualified to help them. Her retort to that is, that's just big medicine and big pharma telling you that someone can't be a healer. No, it's my common sense telling me that someone who has a history of being a pathological liar, who takes money from people desperately seeking a solution, and who is someone who with no training whatsoever, no psychological training, should not be counseling people who are suicidal, who are suffering from PTSD, who are suffering from childhood trauma. No, that's just my common sense. I ain't the brightest bulb on the chandelier, but I know that. The documentary focuses on Teal and on this man named Blake Dyer, who was first one of her lovers and then became her best friend slash servant slash mess cleaner upper. I mean, talk about codependence and enmeshment. This man washes her hair for her. Brett is a very, very quiet and soft-spoken man, and during the documentary, he meets this woman, Julia, and they fall in love. Teal Swan goes on a tirade when Brett moves this woman into the house, telling him about how she has to be careful with her inner circle. She uses that word a lot. And she wants to start having the people in their inner circle sign contracts. So they get this contract out, and it says, no one comes before Teal, not even your own children come before Teal, not your own families. You are not allowed to have personal boundaries that rub up against Teal's personal boundaries. I abhor people like this. It's just very hard for me to talk about this without getting wound up. Teal is tired of the outside criticism that she's getting at this point in time. And so she hires a private investigator, pays for a private investigator to look into herself, to look into her own organization. She really believes that this private investigator is going to come back and tell the world that Teal is just the best. Well, the opposite happens. The more this private investigator looks into what Teal is doing, the angrier this person becomes. Watch the documentary if you want. Wait till it's free, though. In one scene, Juliana, who is the new lover of this ex-lover of Teal's, says something very benign, just kind of barely questioning Teal. Now, you have to understand, Teal has a totally flat affect. She sits like this all the time, and she talks like this all the time. If she smiles, it's kind of like a very small smile. She goes out of her way to stay like this. And I think that's probably as a child who was always out of control, she learned that didn't get her the respect. So she's learned over the years to stay very, very calm. But as Julia questions her, she turns to Julia and says, you just crossed a line. And then from that point on, it's like war between these two, like the most flaccid, passive-aggressive, emotionless war you've ever seen, but a war. Blake ends up deciding to leave Teal's compound to be with Juliana, and they get married. To this point, we've only seen Teal being her fake guru self, but as Blake is saying his final goodbyes, really leaving after more than a decade, she turns to him without changing her tone or her face at all. She's sitting on the kitchen counter, and he's trying to like pat her on the leg and say goodbye. And she looks at him and says, you are a loser, and you'll always be a loser. You can see he kind of like dies inside. This man is doing something so brave and so strong, leaving a cult, the only thing he has ever known, the only thing he's ever been accepted into, the thing that he has lived his whole life for. He's leaving that because he's following his heart. And for that, this thing calls him a loser. At that point in time, I wanted to like jump through the TV screen and knock her on her ass. And then also give him kind of a smack upside the head for caring what she thinks, but then a very big hug. It was a lot. What I'm saying is I had a lot of emotions. At one point in this documentary, a man challenges the fact that Teal says she has no peers. She is God. She is the one and only. And when this man challenges her, she gets very, very angry. And she says, if I lined up all the fastest people in the world and had a race, and the fastest man in the world ran and won, are you going to tell the fastest man in the world that he doesn't have the right to teach you how to run? You talk about a straw man argument. Complex, multifaceted spirituality and mental illness mixed with trauma and behavioral disorders versus a foot race? How do... Again, why does this matter? Why should we care? These people are adults. Let them follow some idiot if they want to, right? Okay, fine. Where does that get us? When we stop fighting against people who are evil, people who outright lie, who ignore science and expertise, and we allow them to run unchecked, hurting people, you don't think that's going to have an effect on the rest of us? If you believe that, you have been asleep for the last 7 or 8 years here in America. It matters because we are better than these people. You and I, we have compassion. We have empathy. We are better than those that hurt people. We care because we are more fully evolved creatures. And that brings me to the most disturbing part of what Teal Swan is about. Teal Swan has openly stated that suicide is nothing more than a reset button. You just heard that right. You heard that correctly. Because she believes in reincarnation, she teaches fragile, hurting, lonely, damaged, traumatized human beings that committing suicide is simply pressing the reset button. Now, of course, after she said that, she tried to walk it back and said we didn't understand what she meant by that. But every time she discusses this issue, she makes it worse for herself. To date, I have found 6 families that claim Teal Swan is directly responsible for the death of their loved one. Did she pull the trigger? No. Did she tell these people that taking themselves out was hitting the reset button? She sure did. Teal Swan has made a lot of money and gained a lot of fame by doing basically this. She recruits and attracts people with childhood trauma, people who are genuinely hurting or genuinely seeking to better their lives. They are looking for something more in life, as many of us do throughout our lives or at certain times in our lives. Teal Swan then uses this debunked form of science known as recovered memories to convince these people that they were ritualistically or satanically abused as children. She helps them remember these locked away memories. Again, neuroscientists have stated this just is not how our memories work. And then suddenly, where the people may have had some bad memories or actual instances of abuse, they're remembering watching babies be sacrificed and people in robes and candles and rituals where they didn't remember those things before. These people then confront their families and inform them that they have recovered these memories, aka Teal Swan has put a bunch of shit in their heads. And then their families are, of course, mortified and angry and denying what they're being accused of. This causes the accuser to become alienated from their family. And what is the result of that? They grow closer to and more dependent on Teal Swan. This is just about as insidious as it gets. There is no moral to this story. There is no conclusion. There is no crime that goes to trial. No closure of any kind. Quite a few of you asked me to do an episode on this situation, and I'm always going to oblige you. If I'm being honest, I don't feel like this was very thorough on my part. I'm way too emotional about this shit. But there is so much more to this story. I try to keep these episodes to around 30 minutes. I squeezed in what I could, but I've really only brushed over a lot of the topics. The main documentary is called The Deep End. Watch it when it's for free. There's another one called Open Shadow, the story of Teal Swan. That is not a documentary. It's a fluff piece made by Teal's supporters and Teal herself. The Deep End does a far better job at giving you a less biased look at who Teal Swan is. All films have some type of bias, but if you go down the rabbit hole, just be prepared because there are message boards and Reddit threads and podcasts, and you're going to be very, very disappointed when you find out how many people are defending and supporting and following this woman. Or maybe you won't be. You're true crime people, just like I am. And if there's one thing that we know, it's that we live among monsters. And sometimes those monsters are pretty statuesque brunettes with ice water in their veins. Whew, that was a big one today. Thank you for staying with me. Hit the like button if you like the video. If you want to see more on this, let me know. Subscribe to the channel. And if you really want to support our community, join Patreon. If you only want to donate a few bucks a month, that helps. In the end, we're trying to raise money to get enough to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA from sexual assaults and other things in storage that cannot be tested because there's no money. We want to pay to have some of those kits tested, so we close the case and we get the perpetrator's DNA in the system in case they're linked to other crimes. By donating to Patreon, you help me keep the channel alive, and eventually that's the goal. Whew, I need a drink or a massage or I don't know, maybe just to hit my head against the wall for a few minutes. Thank you for hanging with me for this today. It was a lot. Stay safe, my friends. I appreciate you more than you know. Please be kind to each other. Take care of your own. Take care of your strangers. Take care of your neighbors. We are a village. I will see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.